Hello and welcome to my graduate research project. My name is CHarding and this is for Human Resource Management Law at Amberton University with Professor Diane Sanchez for the summer 2020 session. My project is on case 10.1, Brenna Lewis versus Heartland Inns. The question here is, if an employee is effective and successful in their position, does it matter what clothes they wear? We're going to be talking about sex discrimination and retaliation. Sex discrimination is when an individual of one gender is favored in employment decisions over someone of the other gender. Retaliation is illegal and occurs when an employer takes an action against an employee to punish them for engaging in a legally protected activity. Lewis's case was dismissed by the district court. However, the Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the decision and the case proceeded to trial. First, let's take a look at Heartland Inns. Heartland operated 18 locations throughout Iowa in the early 2000s. Heartland currently only has one location remaining. They have 3 shifts for their guest service representatives, or GSRs. They have the A shift, which is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., B shift, which is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., and C shift, which is 11 p.m. till 7 a.m. We have a couple folks as the cast of characters for this case. First is the Director of Operations, Barbara Cullinan. Next, the Human Resource Director, Christy Nosbish, and the General Manager of the Ankeny, Iowa branch, Lisa Stiefel. Now, as the GSRs are working, they're responsible for several tasks. They need to create a warm, inviting environment for the guests by providing helpful and professional service. They need to discern, anticipate, and provide to their guests' needs. Of course, they need to provide information such as accommodations and services in the area, as often guests at hotels will look for dinner suggestions or other extracurriculars outside the hotel. Then they need to record any reservation changes accurately, process customer transactions, and any other related reports. To be a GSR, you need to have a high school diploma or equivalent plus 1 year of experience. The GSRs also need to have good public relations skills and, of course, sound communication skills. They operate the cash register, the phone system, and various office equipment, as well as have computer knowledge is quite helpful in this position. Finally, having some sort of retail or sales experience is also quite helpful. Lewis worked at the Waterloo location from July 2005 to November 2006 as a part-time GSR on the C shift. According to her general manager, she did a great job and received 2 merit increases in pay. She resigned from the Waterloo hotel location because she moved to the Des Moines area. The general manager thought so highly of her that she contacted other general managers in that area trying to help Lewis find a new job. In December of 2006, Lewis was working part-time at the Altoona location and the Ankeny location, both on C shift. The general manager at the Altoona location was very pleased with her performance and stated she made a good impression with guests. The manager contacted the Director of Operations, Cullinan, to receive authorization to move Lewis from part-time C shift to full-time C shift. Cullinan approved the move over the phone. Meanwhile, the general manager Stiefel at the Ankeny location also thought quite highly of Lewis, stating she did a great job, she fit the GSR position really well, and she was well liked by the customers. So Stiefel spoke to Cullinan over the phone regarding Lewis. She wanted to move Lewis from part-time C shift to full-time A shift. Cullinan again approved the move. Neither manager conducted an interview. Cullinan never stated an interview would be necessary. So Lewis accepted the A position at the Ankeny location. In January of 2007, as Lewis was in her full-time day position at Ankeny, Cullinan came in and happened to observe Lewis at the front desk. Cullinan pulled Stiefel into the office and stated she was concerned about Lewis's appearance. She said she wasn't a good fit and she just had a gut feeling about her. Cullinan also said that Lewis lacked the Midwestern girl look, and Cullinan really felt like Heartland took 2 steps back with Lewis at the front desk. The director of operations then demanded that Stifel move Lewis back to C shift. Stifel denies this request. Cullinan then states that she needs to conduct a second interview on Lewis before Lewis can take the A position. Yet, Lewis had already been in position for nearly a month at this point. Cullinan then asks Stifel for her resignation. After Stifel resigns, the hiring practices suddenly change for the GSRs. Video equipment is sent out and installed at all the Heartland locations so Cullinan and the HR director Nasbish can see the candidates before the general managers offer a front desk position. After Stifel resigns, she tells Lewis about the Midwestern girl comment that Cullinan made. 2 weeks later, Cullinan has a meeting with Lewis alone in the office. Now, the two women have very different stories about what happened during this meeting. Lewis states Cullinan demanded a second interview, and Lewis asked her if it was lawful for her to conduct an interview so many weeks after she had already been in position. And is it because she doesn't have the Midwestern girl look? Lewis refused to admit who told her about that comment. Lewis also states that she was crying throughout the conversation because she was worried Cullinan was going to force her back to the overnight shift. They also discussed how the hotels have seen a decrease in revenue, and Cullinan states that they need some new management. Lewis suggests this is because of recent policy changes. They no longer had smoking rooms and no longer allowed pets. Cullinan states Lewis was combative and argumentative about Heartland's policies and procedures throughout this conversation. Lewis was also aware that other staff members in her position didn't have to have an interview before transferring to another shift. She alleged that she didn't have the right look, and that's why Cullinan was against her working the A shift. Lewis also states that she never accepted nor declined the second interview, yet Cullinan says she outright declined it. After this meeting, Cullinan had a meeting with Nasbish and other HR and management personnel. They discussed Cullinan's conversation with Lewis and determined she should be terminated. 3 days later, Lewis was discharged. In talking about sex discrimination, there are also sex stereotypes. Lewis's appearance did not conform to a feminine sex stereotype. Lewis preferred to wear loose-fitting clothing and men's pants. She did not wear makeup and kept her hair cut short. Stifel later stated that Lewis had an Ellen DeGeneres kind of look. Cullinan often stated she preferred pretty females at the front desk. Many co-workers had heard her making this claim. Heartland's dress code for women called for dresses or suits, dressy or formal shirts with a tie or bow. If they were wearing skirts or shorts, they had to be knee-length or longer, and they could wear capris or pants. Additionally, if their legs were bare, they must be shaved and smooth, and if wearing sandals, their toes must be pedicured and painted. Meanwhile, men working at GSRs are required to wear dress shirts or slacks with a tie or a sport coat. During warmer weather, they were allowed to wear polos. Meanwhile, women were not. And during the cooler weather, they were allowed to wear a sweater over their Oxford shirt. It sure seems to me like there was quite a bit of sex stereotyping going on with this dress code policy. After her termination, Lewis sues under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the Iowa Civil Rights Act. She states that she was discriminated against because of her nonconformance with gender stereotypes. Under Title VII, it is unlawful to discriminate with respect to the individual's compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of sex. The district court denied her case as they were mistakenly viewing Title VII. They were basing it off of if she was treated differently than similarly situated males. The circuit court disagreed with this because the Supreme Court had previously ruled that Title VII has to do with the protection of the individual, not the protection of the whole minority group. Cullinan's remarks reflect a discriminatory attitude towards Lewis and can be used as evidence. To establish a prima facie case for sex discrimination, Lewis must prove she is within a protected class, that she was qualified for the position, that she suffered an adverse employment action, and that other employees outside of the protected class were in similar situations and treated more fairly and favorably. Heartland states Lewis was terminated because she refused to participate in the second interview and that she was confrontational and unsupportive of Heartland's policies. Cullinan was the primary decision maker on the HR personnel, and the other managers based their employment decision on what Cullinan said after her meeting with Lewis. Lewis was never interviewed regarding that meeting. HR never investigated that situation. So the case went to trial in federal court for 5 days, where the jury rejected her claim of sex stereotyping. The jury approved of the retaliation claim. She was awarded monetary damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages. Lewis was also awarded attorney fees and costs. Employers must remember and realize that even if there is a discrimination case and it fails, there is still a great risk for a retaliation claim to succeed in court. There are 3 case questions for this case. First, am I in agreement with the decision? No, not necessarily. From my research, it seems the sex discrimination case was stronger than the retaliation case, and we'll look further at sex discrimination shortly and how the other cases really align with this one. Next, is the feminine appearance a justifiable criteria when selecting an employee? Again, no, I don't think it is. There are far greater concerns to consider when hiring. Personally, I have such a difficult time staffing at my store, someone's appearance is just about the last thing that I consider. Finally, is there an ethical resolution to this dilemma? I believe as managers and HR representatives, we need to create and promote a positive work environment. We need to encourage our team to come with us with concerns, and we need to act diligently to resolve those concerns. There are often issues that arise solely because someone was closed-minded and failed to treat everyone equally. Ethically responding to this case would be focusing on honesty, integrity, and fairness for all employees, regardless of their appearance or clothing choice. The first case we're going to look at is the infamous Price Waterhouse versus Ann Hopkins. The year was 1982, and Ann Hopkins was a senior manager at Price Waterhouse. She was on track for partner, and she was a solid top performer. Both the district court and the appeals court were found in favor of Hopkins because she was a victim to sex stereotyping. This was a landmark case because it was determined that any employer who discriminates against women because they do not wear dresses and makeup is engaging in sex discrimination, because the discrimination would not occur but for the victim's sex. At Price Waterhouse, there's a process for becoming a partner. The following year, Hopkins was in consideration for partner, and during this process, other partners write comments about the partner candidates. Those comments are then submitted to the admissions committee. This committee reviews the comments and makes a suggestion to the policy board. Now, the admissions committee does not make their recommendations solely based on the comments. For instance, just because 80% of your comments were positive, that doesn't automatically mean you get your name on the list. In 1983, there were 662 partners at the firm, and only 7 of them were women. When Hopkins was in consideration, there were 88 candidates proposed, and Hopkins was the only woman. Following the process, 47 were admitted to partnership, 21 were rejected, and 20 were held in consideration. Hopkins was one of the 20 held. Hopkins had many positive comments from the partners. They praised her character and her professionalism. She was independent, she was decisive, and she operated with integrity. However, there were also some negative comments too. She was seen as aggressive and lacking interpersonal skills. She was referred to as macho. She was advised to take a course in charm school. Additionally, many didn't appreciate a lady using profanities. She was also advised by a partner to walk more femininely, talk more femininely, dress more femininely, wear makeup, have her hair styled, and wear jewelry. Wow, what a laundry list for specific expectations for Hopkins and her appearance. Following this, Hopkins resigned from Price Waterhouse and filed a sex discrimination lawsuit. Meanwhile, she started working in another firm. The Supreme Court ruled that if gender stereotyping played a motivating role in the employment decision, it violated Title VII. She was awarded partnership at Price Waterhouse, so she resigned from her new position and returned, where she worked until she retired in 2002. Next case we're going to look at is Smith versus the City of Salem, Ohio. Smith was a 7-year lieutenant at the fire department. He had no incidents or issues throughout the years. He was diagnosed with gender identity disorder and was encouraged by his doctor to start adapting a more feminine appearance. His coworkers started commenting on his appearance, stating he wasn't masculine enough. He went to his direct supervisor, had a conversation, and explained his diagnosis. Smith asked his supervisor to not tell the chief of the fire department about this. The supervisor promised that he wouldn't, then of course he did. So the chief met with the city's law director and the city's executive body, which is a group that included the mayor, the safety director, the auditor, and the service director. They discussed Smith, his diagnosis, and the fact that he was moving toward a feminine appearance, and devised a plan to terminate his employment. They decided they would tell Smith he needed to undergo 3 psychological evaluations. The executive body was hoping that he would resign or refuse to comply. If he refused, then they would terminate him for insubordination. One member, the safety director, was quite quiet throughout the meeting and called Smith afterwards to let him know about the witch hunt and about the evaluations they were going to make him undergo. 2 days after the meeting, Smith's lawyer contacted the mayor and explained the legal ramifications if the city decided to follow through with their plan. Then Smith received his right to sue letter from the EEOC. After that, the chief suspended Smith for some alleged policy violation, where Smith states this suspension was retaliation for attaining a lawyer. Smith filed in district court, but his claims were denied, so he appealed. The circuit court ruled in his favor because sex stereotyping was the driving force behind the city's actions. Like Hopkins and Lewis, Smith was not fulfilling a stereotype for how a man should act and dress. Now on to the literature review. The first article is A Fresh Look at Title VII, Sexual Orientation Discrimination as Sex Discrimination by Anthony Michael Kreese. This article focuses on how the perception of sex has changed, that sex previously only referred to gender, where after the Hively versus Ivy Tech case in 2017, the view changed to include sexual orientation discrimination. The next article is Third Generation Discrimination, an empirical analysis of judicial decision-making in gender discrimination litigation by Catherine Ross Dunham and Christopher Leopold. This article focuses on Title VII federal court cases over a 10-year period, asking the question, why are discrimination-based lawsuits not more successful for female plaintiffs? Dunham and Leopold talk about the gender-based discrimination to females and how workplace policies still favor the male-dominated group, often written by male-dominated hierarchy. The next article is The Retaliation Doctrine under Title VII of the Civil Rights Law, a primer for managers and employees, by Frank Cavaco and Baudin Mudaba. Their article talks about proper training of policies and procedures for managers and supervisors, as well as the HR department, to combat discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. When discrimination concerns arise, managers need to react immediately and accordingly and hold those accountable for their actions. Additionally, managers need to create the appropriate corporate culture where harassment and retaliation don't exist. Managers need to value ethics, morality, and diversity. The final article is Does It Pay to Be a Manager? The Significance of the Manager Rule in Analyzing Retaliation Claims under Title VII by Christina Giappone. Her article talks about the manager rule, which states that employees who oppose their employer's actions on behalf of another employee in accordance with their job duties, have not engaged in a protective activity sufficient enough to support a retaliation claim. Managers must report work-related concerns because it is in their job duties, whereas employees report complaints because that is their duty. For the limitations of studies, there might be personal or cultural biases, such as each person studying these cases might have personal experiences and opinions that will affect their understanding. For instance, I have had non-stereotypical dressing men and women, as well as transgender individuals working for me in the past. Therefore, my views of these cases might be different for someone with more traditional views. We have limited access to data as we don't have a formal law library at our fingertips. And all researchers will have time constraints, whether work-related or family-related. We all have time hurdles we need to jump through. Finally, as laws are constantly changing and evolving, our understandings of them are too. We need to constantly be engaged in HR law developments. The methodology used for this project was researching scholarly articles on EBSCO, investigating past cases relating to and the development of Title VII, and as well as considering my past as a hiring manager and looking at the employment decisions that I have made. I believe these cases I've studied have had a great impact to the 21st century workforce. Our knowledge of the Civil Rights Act, and specifically Title VII, will impact our hiring decisions by focusing on the candidate and their qualifications and what they'll bring to the position, instead of just focusing on their appearance. We need to be aware of the struggle women still face in the workplace, as well as homosexual and transgender individuals. Managers need to modify their training programs and career path modules to include a more diverse workforce, as our candidates are significantly changing with each generation. Finally, we need to be more open-minded and not look for cookie-cutter candidates. In conclusion, managers that are hiring need to put a greater focus on qualifications, personality, and job fit. For instance, Lewis was a great front desk rep for Heartland. She did her job well. All three managers she worked for complimented her performance, and yet she didn't have the right look for Cullinan. Hopkins was an awesome senior manager at Price Waterhouse. She even landed a $25 million contract with the State Department, a contract that they said was partner-level quality. Finally, Smith was a successful lieutenant with the fire department for 7 years with no incidents, yet he was discriminated against because of his appearance. Each of these cases focus on appearance and an expectation for how a candidate should look, despite the fact that they were all successful in their positions. We need to be more open to a new perception of what a competent candidate means, and that might mean helping our more traditional coworkers evolve their views to today's current workforce. Thank you so much for taking the time to review my project. Here are my references. Thank you and stay safe.